I've been a legal observer with the ACLU since 2017. I thought that if I was a legal observer, I would be able to kind of protect the people who are going to more actively engage.
I became a legal observer because I was seeing what was happening during the BLM protests.
I became a legal observer after Donald Trump's election.
One of the first things I did after he was elected president was to look up the ACLU. I felt pretty powerless, but even though I couldn't change everything, there were things I could do to protect our democracy.
I think a lot of people don't know who the legal observers are.
We're neutral witnesses who are watching to see how police will interact with protesters. But we want to make sure if you want to exercise your right to protest or your right to free speech, that you're allowed to.
I think that Portland has a special culture of protest. It is deeply ingrained in a lot of kind of average people's lives here.
You know, protest itself is an important way to just tell the government how the people feel.
The freedom of the press, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of protest, they're actually enshrined in our Constitution. When the United States was founded, a lot of the activity that went into our founding was protest, saying that the government at that time, England, was not being accountable to the people in the United States. Those are really critical rights for us so that we can make sure our current government and future governments are accountable to the people.
When we go out to observe a protest, there's almost always two or more of us.
One person will pay attention to what's going on and the other will document.
And there's almost always someone we call a monitor who is on their computer watching social media and is also just there in case something happens at the protest.
Primarily, we're looking at any sort of aggression, arrests, detentions that we might see.
Say like one person threw a water bottle, and in response we saw triple chaser tear gas grenades fired at people. Or police protocol is to shoot rubber bullets, you know, maybe from your knee down, and we saw police officers aim for your face.
Asking police to provide evidence of the wrongdoing that they've done is like asking the fox to guard the henhouse. We need neutral observers who can gather that evidence because the government won't always keep itself accountable.
Over the years, we have trained about 200 legal observers.
By far the most common group of people who decide to be ACLU legal observers are lawyers.
But we're not all lawyers. We have people who have retired.
Some of them are students.
I've met software developers. There are a couple theatrical professionals running around.
So we have an array of people.
People think that we get paid to be out there, which we do not. We are all volunteers.
We've done a lot of different kinds of events.
From large protests like the Women's March to smaller vigils.
From city hall meetings to the George Floyd protests.
In the summer of 2020, we had legal observers available and out 7 days a week.
2020 protests were an incredibly traumatic experience for our legal observers.
I have seen a lot of instances of violence coming from the state and directed against protesters.
I've seen people arrested and thrown to the ground for literally not doing anything. Tear gas hurled at crowds that are just standing around. I can think of events downtown where there were 30 protesters holding a Black Lives Matter flag, and it was met with a line of riot cops that exceeded the number of protesters.
We've seen legal observers be arrested for simply doing their jobs.
Before I knew it, I was being grabbed by a police officer, body slammed me to the ground. They dislocated my left shoulder and my left wrist. And then they took me downtown, they booked me, they processed me, and I was there till about 5 a.m.
A lot of people were hurt, but they kept showing up.
Somebody has to hold accountability.
Because if you don't have people there to tell the story, then only one side of the story is going to be told.
And we can look at authoritarian regimes all over the world. We can look at our own history to see what happens when the only narrative is the government's. And it's not a good world.
There are some elected officials who say that the only way to achieve public safety is by adding more police officers to police departments. But if that were true, we would have solved the problem of crime and violence already in our city, because that's been the strategy for decades. At the ACLU of Oregon, we want to focus on community-centered and led solutions, because that's the only way to break this endless cycle of police violence and brutality toward the communities.